welcome to our discussion panel about bridging the gap in the business primarily, but I think some of the things you might pull from this session to be applied in many different areas. My name is Denise Ruhoff. I'm the moderator, and I promised them I'd behave, so I'm really trying to manage myself well right now. You all know. I have 24 years of professional experience, 20 years in software engineering, 2 years in human resources, which I learned a lot, and 2 years in manufacturing. I just want to thank you for coming today and Hackfort for having us. Last year, I went to the Client Experience Summit, which was kind of a last-minute one-off session, and it really changed the way I viewed my company and my job and what we were doing. And so I'm just really happy to be here and get back to this event. That's right, I joined Count in 2016 as a product owner, and I am currently an Agile team facilitator, Scrum Master for another word. And yeah, that's me. I'm passionate about this topic, and I have been for many, many, many years. It's kind of shocking how early in my career that I encountered these gaps that we as humans have, and I'm excited for this conversation. Will all of you introduce yourselves, please? Starting with Tricia Phillips.
Yes, I will.
Thank you. I know. How is the volume? Is it too loud? Is it stupid? It's loud? Okay.
I'm Tricia Phillips. I'm the Senior Vice President of Product and Strategy at Count. I've got about 20 years of e-commerce and fraud prevention experience in the product side, and the client success side, and the operations side. And I started my career at Amazon in the late 90s. I worked for a couple of other startups in Seattle, and have also worked for giant companies like Visa. So a broad spectrum.
Tricia, we also, and all of the rest of you, not just her, why is this topic important to you?
This topic is important to me because I got 2 reasons. One, because the product and strategy is the thing that I am responsible for driving. It's important that everybody understands why they're doing what they're doing, and also I think it's important for everybody to feel like they know the why behind the job that they do and the value that it brings, and I think that's a cause of a lot of divide, is that we don't take enough time to get people really engaged in why they're doing the job that they're doing and why it's important, and that can be dehumanizing. So,
hi everyone, thanks for being here. I'm Elizabeth Davis, and I run strategic planning and finance at Count. I've only been there just under a year. And I really have a lot of fun experience in kind of the strategic side of things on the business side. I started my career in accounting and finance, and then switched into the strategy roles and have just really enjoyed them. And the reason this topic is so important to me is for that exact thing. Being able to impact decision-making and influence decision-making within an organization requires bridging this gap, and that's my jam. That's what I love to do, is try to be the translator between the business and the tech side of things, and I just really find it fascinating. So.
I echo thank you everyone for being here, and thank you Hackfort for having us. My name is Brockett. I'm a partner business manager at Count. I'm not used to speaking on a microphone. Which is to say I'm responsible for the business and relationship management of some of our larger partners, particularly in the banking sector. My professional history spans 25 years, 10 of which I ran my own business, the last 10 of which I've been in specialty sales and project management. And oh, why this is very important to me. Stole my thunder a little bit with the translator. I'm really excited about sharing that. No, but you'll hear a lot of that, I'm sure. I do feel in my role that translation is critical between not only the business and technology sides of the company in which I work, but the companies with which I work.
Hi, I'm Janice Hetrick, and I am the Site Reliability Engineering Manager, and I'm also responsible for the business side for corporate operations. So my role is basically to bridge the gap between the business side as well as the technology side, just like these ladies here. I also have a background in engineering, so I was 18 years, I was a semiconductor process engineer, and the last 18 years I've been in IT, primarily about a decade in management. And this is important to me because the people who work for me, I'm passionate for, and I want to make sure that they have the support and a person that they can turn to engage in any topic that they need to, and as well as supporting Elizabeth and Tricia and Dawn, Danielle in their roles to get the business side moving forward.
I'm Danielle Eckstrom. I'm a product owner at Count. My first degree is in philosophy, so not necessarily the most technical start to things. I ended up working in higher education, worked in healthcare, but in all of those jobs, even though my title didn't necessarily reflect it, my main job became helping the people in business who were in finance or strategy or things like that talk to the people who were building whatever cool new tool we needed that day. So because of that, I decided I wanted to understand a little bit better. So I have a degree in computer science. And then for me, becoming a product owner was the best way possible that I could take the experience I had, the knowledge that I had, and help sit as an advocate for my tech teams and work with people outside of those teams to help make sure that everyone's on the same page. And that's why it's important.
Thank you. What do I do next? No. So, regarding this topic, we automatically have a gap in this room between you and us. And part of bridging that gap is finding out your perspective and what you want out of this session. And would anybody be willing to shout out what you're wanting out of this session so that we can ensure we're addressing what you expected? Or opinions about this topic, or a strategy or a situation you want help with specifically. Anybody, please. And you can, what we have in common, I'm sure, despite our backgrounds, is we want to be successful. I'm sure you can relate to that, and you probably can appreciate that. So thank you for volunteering.
Yeah, I was going to say challenge accepted. So as a tech lead on a dev team, one of the real struggles that we have with working with product owners and business, the people who define the business need, is that they always want it faster, and they don't always value the quality of the software that we produce. And so I find myself in an advocacy position often for things like test-driven development, and especially getting business requirements written before we start writing software code. And so I'd just like to kind of have you speak to that, like how is that changing, and what does that look like for you specifically?
Thank you. Anyone else? Come on, Melissa, Tara.
I feel like the audio and under
Right. Come on. Yes, somebody else. Good.
So I'm a computer science major right now at BSU, and so I'm kind of wondering, like, before I enter this world, what it's actually like before I just jump in feet first.
There's going to be countless examples for you that we have planned. Well, how about this? If I would like this to be a lively discussion too, because we're sitting up here in these stools, and I don't know. if you don't buy into something we're saying, or if you have a question then and there, one of the rules of engagement, I'm the moderator, so I can make the rules whether you like it or not. Sorry. No, I'm just looking at you all, not just you, Tricia. Feel free, like, I guess opposing views or differing views is very important. And so shout those out if you don't buy the answer or want the answer extended. Did you?
No, I was just adjusting the audio. I thought it was a little loud.
I thought so too.
Thank you guys so much for
Yes.
Yeah, I could actually use a little guidance in bridging the gap, so you don't mind. So I don't need the microphone.
I don't either. So can I just drop this?
So actually, if you guys can pass the mic around, it'd be great, just because we are recording.
Oh,
gotcha.
excuse me. I'm very compliant with rules, so I like to comply when possible.
So I work in corporate legal and have for the last 2 years. One thing that's become very apparent to me is there's a huge gap between corporate entity or corporate groups and leadership with development teams. We have everything from software developers to plant managers and actual factories. So I'd like to know what your strategies have been for interacting from the corporate level to the development teams and helping to communicate their needs upwards and corporate directives downwards and helping to align those.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we'll cover that too. Tricia.
Let's start
Well, hey, I wanted to understand their perspective
I know, but
first.
we can answer questions
Yeah.
and then ask.
You guys are not throwing us for a loop yet.
Okay.
So, Tricia, so why are we still talking about this?
About the gap?
The gap.
Because people are complicated and communication is hard. I think the question about, so your question on speed, and I think it comes down to why bigger companies tend to have a larger gap than smaller companies. So when you're a startup and everybody's, sitting in a garage together and you're like, we know exactly what we're trying to do and we know how we're gonna get there and we're all, you're seeing how hard it is, and so there's not that disconnect like, what do you guys have been doing? The larger the company gets, the more you get pressure from a board and from, the sales team's like, hey, we have this client who wants a thing, but only if we can give it to them in 3 months. And so then suddenly the business has this intense pressure to get things done faster. I do think that it's important to build a culture of a quality culture and building in time constantly to iterate and improve the platform and just say, we're gonna always have 10% of our sprint is gonna be refactoring, and that's what we do, and that's part of the cost of doing business. And just building that in and saying that's non-negotiable because that's how we build a good product is easier than I think sometimes technology teams that I have worked with, not at Count, but in prior lives, they kind of sneak that in, the refactoring, and so I'm like, why didn't anything get done this sprint? And they're like, we got stuff done. And they did, they just didn't say what they were doing, right? And if they said, we had to do this refactoring and it's gonna make things much faster and everything's gonna be great, I'd be like, oh, okay, well that makes sense. Thank you for telling me that. So I think that communication, there's an assumption that it will be valued because sometimes it's not, right? Because it's not, you can't see it, or a person who's not a developer can't see it. But I think that's, those pressures of finance are a big driver of that. And so just being able to communicate that is finance.
No, I was the bad guy, of course.
And sales.
I think it's such a great question, and I find myself encountering it from the other side all the time, because I think the question is not just why is this happening, but why does it feel so different from both sides, really, right? So there's so much about the tech side that the business doesn't quite understand, and there's so much about the business side that the tech side doesn't understand, and they're both two sides to the coin. You must have both, right? So I think that Tricia's right when it comes to the communication and thinking about what's the why. Would it be helpful if the development team sat with finance or operations or strategic planning or sales once a quarter to understand what we're up against at the high level from the stakeholders, the board, the investors, the street, whatever the case may be. Would it be beneficial if the finance people had to go sit in the room and watch the plan for the sprint or go to Scrum, see what the answers are? I think that's the real question, because especially to Tricia's point, in the larger size organizations, things get so separated and siloed so quickly. And I know that's cliche to talk about a silo, but it's real. It really is something that takes place, especially in larger orgs. And so I find myself constantly trying to say, okay, why? Why is this X number of sprints? What's happening here? Why do we have to do, what's that term? Refactoring? See, learning something every day. Why do we have to do refactoring? Why is that a piece of it? And I think that what the business needs to understand and really think through is, to your point exactly, let's do this sustainably. Let's do this from a quality perspective so we can continue to build and go again on top of that. What the tech side probably needs to understand sometimes is that things run on a quarterly basis, or X number of things might be happening at the big picture, from an acquisition or from a merger, or even just from a your growth perspective. And so there's constant battle back and forth. So I would say if there's opportunity to find a way to talk about the why from both sides, I think that's a really, really valuable thing to do within an organization.
Do any of you feel that the nature of the business makes gaps even more prevalent? We talked about size, but are the gaps no matter the business?
Oh,
She has something
I would
to
think
say.
it would depend on capital structure and kind of the end game of what the business is trying to accomplish. Because I know that when I've been in big orgs or small orgs, it really depends on your capital structure. So are you owned by a board? Are your investors expecting X return? What kind of time frame do you have? I would say maybe the capital structure as much as the size of the org would be a factor there. Truly, because if you're just this great little company in Boise trying to grow up, the expectations might be a little bit different than if you're part of the street.
So on a related note, I think that another way that it can be different and more challenging is it depends on what you're building. From a software perspective, it's a lot easier to communicate oftentimes to a business something that's visual. So if you're building, something that has a really clear UI, or building like a web page, it's easier to be able to see and communicate that value. Where all of the stuff that happens behind the scenes when you push that button might be weeks of work, and that doesn't mean it's any less valuable. But I think that there's a bigger challenge for tech communicating back up that value to the business and the time. I try to discourage people in product from using the word automatically. For example, it's just magic.
What's the easiest thing we could do?
Yeah, it's just magic. It'll just automatically happen. No one has to do anything. Okay, well, yeah, but automatic means automated. It means you have to build a process. It doesn't just happen overnight. So I think it's important to remember that depending on what you are building, that also changes that communication.
And I'd like to add to that in the sense of, as a manager for technical side, I definitely approach that in a way that I look to be able to support the team that I have, so that I'm constantly trying to collaborate with product and or with finance to say, hey, we have to work in training in here too, right? We have to work in cross-functional training. We have to work in how can we grow the knowledge within the business, because what the tool you're using today may not be the tool you're using in 2-3 weeks, right? Or even a month. And so it's constant learning, and that does not always produce something instantly either. So if you're in the middle of a sprint and you have to take a couple days to learn how to build something out, that doesn't account for the time that's taken away from other people, right? And so having finance understand that and work with them to say, hey, we need to calculate this in, because it's a risk. If we don't stay ahead of the game, we can't, keep moving forward.
What's your name?
My name is Russell.
Russell? Russell. Thanks for the question. What keeps ringing in my ears is when you said they don't value. I think I stopped hearing for a moment after that, and it continues to just bounce around in my head. And it really brings us back to the subject, right? The subject on which we're all speaking, which is that is something that can be addressed from a very human perspective. And it doesn't necessarily have to be addressed from a technical or a business perspective. It can fully cross that bridge just from communication. Right? So when I hear you say they don't value, and I hear Danielle say technology needs to Yeah, exactly, the languaging, right? So we'll talk about even working through the language of us and them and you know, getting clear about who are they and who are we and is there opportunity for more inclusivity there. I think it's also incumbent on the business side and on the sales side to not just receive the information around the value of the product, but to reciprocate the appreciation, because we would not have the opportunity to do what we do without the work that you do, right? In your team. So that they don't value can be solved with communication, I think. And there's a lot more behind that, but I just wanted to address that piece of what you said.
And since it came up, that's where I want to go next. Because I think it's clear we all have experienced this, et cetera, et cetera. So I would love to move into specific strategies, because I don't think anybody here is going to debate, but I see two hands where we might have questions.
What is the language that people want to hear? Do they want to hear about, you know, TCO? Do they want to hear about ROI? You know, how do we want to, you know, are you looking at you're talking about risk and you're talking about your, you know, your interest rate for your CapEx, you know, which is going to determine your ROI. What are your lending rates? You know, what are you looking at on your mergers and acquisitions? You know, these are the questions that, like, development wants to know, because at the end of the day, you're on the same team. So
Right.
how do you move forward from, you know, your us versus them mentality where, you know, technologists are like, oh, you know, the business people, they don't understand anything. Where, and then,
Never heard
you know,
that.
and vice versa, you know, business people are like, oh, you know technology, how would you know about, you know, your CapEx? How would you know about your lending rate? How would you know about mergers and acquisitions? You know.
Does anybody want to take some on specific language? I think that's pretty interesting.
I think the larger thing, I'll let you talk about language. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is not assuming that somebody doesn't care about how we're going to price something, or how, you know, what the competitive landscape looks like, or what big deals, you know, I think that we're going to get if we build a certain thing. It's so easy to spend a lot of time talking to finance and talking to sales and saying, here's the vision, and here's what we're going to do. And they go, will you guys go build this now? And not take the time to talk about that, right? Or when they're like, hey, we need more people to be able to do this, and we say, well, we just can't do that right now. Maybe it's because we just had to take, you know, a loan for something or some capital expenditures, and that's why. And explaining that, like respecting people enough to say, this is not that complicated, and I respect you enough to explain why the business needs to make this decision. I think is something that I try to work on myself, because it seems like it's faster to just say, I'm going to give you the information you need to know to do what you need to do. Turns out it's not faster, because then there's a lot of like, I don't understand why. I mean, I think this is dumb. It's way better to actually have those conversations. And what I've also found is people in technology have really good business ideas. And when you don't have that conversation with them, then you don't get their ideas to say, you know, in another organization we tried this thing and it worked really well, and how we capitalized, you know, our time, which I might be like, that's brilliant, you should go talk to Elizabeth. So I think that is, I think to your point, we don't do enough socializing some of those key metrics and business objectives, which is kind of, you know, it's kind of insulting, you know? It's like, just like I don't want the technology team to talk down to me and be like, don't worry your pretty little head, you know, we have to build something and it's gonna work, and you know, just, I don't like that when people say that.
2 weeks, you'll get it.
Yeah, 2 weeks, yes. You know, so I think it just needs to be that reciprocal respect.
I love your question. I love that you're specifically asking about language. I think the answer there is shared language. It doesn't matter whether it's ROI or cap rates or sprints or what's happening in Agile or waterfall. It doesn't. I think it's shared, right? I'm going to share a real life example that happened to me a couple of weeks ago, and I'm slightly embarrassed by it, but
It's
real
okay,
life.
safe.
Are we in a safe place?
Yes, we are.
we had a strategic partner in town, and they were giving us their pitch and going through all this stuff, and I had a huge number forecasted for them, and I was so excited to learn about how they're gonna grow our business, and we're gonna be a partner that's gonna grow theirs, and just all these financial implications that are going on, and over and over and over again, I keep hearing API, we're gonna build an API, it's gonna use an API. And I went back to the office and went straight to the director of IT ops and said, I'm not leaving until you teach me what an API is. I have to understand this, and I want to make sure that I get it, because it's going to make a huge impact to the technologists in the company, it's going to make a huge impact to our sales opportunities, to our strategic partners, and ultimately to our board and to our investors, which is where that's my jam, right? And as we were talking and I started to understand and learn what an API is, the IT ops director said to me, what's the difference between direct sales and channel sales? I don't really understand what a partner is, who that is for us. And I was able to teach him, oh, here's the difference in the way that we acquire business and how we help fund our revenue and how we help work through this. So I think there are 100 terms that, and great language that we can all use, and I think Tricia's exactly right. I desperately want to know so much about the tech world, and I have met so many people on the tech side that have so much great information and, corporate knowledge, industry knowledge about how our business could be impacted. And so I think the answer is shared language. Just try to speak the same language. It will really make an impact, I think.
So you said you went to the director, but any first year out of college
Could have taught me that.
Right, and vice versa, any first year out of college marketing person would know, direct versus, B2B, B2C, whichever way you want to go. And so it's like, you're talking about even siloing by level.
Well, but I'll say that was somebody she
trusted.
She trusted.
Exactly.
And that's what I was going to jump in and say. She's built that relationship, and I think all of us in our roles, no matter what it is, whether it's technology or not, building that gap, bridging that gap is communication. It's having those conversations that are not just about technology, not just about finance, but hey, how are you today? What can I do to help you today? What can I do to support you in the role that you're in, even if you don't work for me, right? That's where I feel my superpower is for the company that I work for, or any company I work for. And if I can build and bridge that gap, then everything else can fall into place. It's not perfect, I'm not saying kumbaya, but at least being able to go to a person and say, I really don't know what this is, can you help me? And then having them be willing to say, I don't know what this is, can you help me? That just opens up so many avenues for us across the spectrum. Yeah.
I think that the key to that is being able to be vulnerable and say, I don't know the answer to this question, and please don't treat me like I'm stupid because I'm asking this question. And I think, again, the larger the organization, the more we start having different goals, like our bonuses are different things, what our boss cares about is a different thing, and there becomes this defensiveness where, I might not want to show that I don't know something because I'm like, well then, then I'm gonna have this chink in my armor, and then people aren't gonna respect the other things that I have to say. Hopefully that's not true, but it is being able to say, I'm gonna be vulnerable enough to say, I don't know what this is, I don't understand, without somebody going, fine, or you should really know that. Why don't you know that by now? Now I don't think that you know how to do your job. That type of trust and respect is, I think, really key, and that's why Elizabeth went to that director, is because she knew that he wasn't going to make her feel stupid.
But the rest of us can.
I would have not said that. I really would have. It was a great clarification.
Great clarification.
I'm sorry, what's your name? Matt. Yeah. I'm going to not fall off my chair right now. They're really slippery. They are very slippery. And had I known we were sitting on exposed stools, I would not want to skirt. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I shouldn't linger. Okay. You bring up something so fascinating, and I thank you for bringing it up, because I really wanted to talk briefly about this, but without context, I just would have been imposing something I wanted to say. So you gave me a reason to say that. Tagging on to what Tricia brought up around vulnerability of asking, we've been mentioning translating and language and communication, and the fact is, you acquire a language before the age of 12, and after the age of 12, you must learn a language. The learning is a lot more difficult than the acquiring, right? And I remember I was teaching at the University of Utah French, and it was a core curriculum requirement, so no matter whether you were a senior and you had just put it off, or you were a freshman, wherever you were, whatever you had studied, however exceptional you were, you still had to take your core language class. And it was absolutely enticing to see how brave or fearful students were to sound like a 3-year-old or younger, because in terms of where they were linguistically, that's how they sounded. So they can speak brilliantly in finance or in product or whatever, in business or sales language, and you want to defer to that because that's where you feel intelligent, so it's where you feel safe. But if you care to bridge that gap, you must step into that bravery and vulnerability and express, I don't know, and I might feel silly that I don't know, but there's no reason really I should know because I haven't yet learned this language.
I think to jump on top of that too is that the group of people that I support, the guys that work for me, the women that work for me, they all have very deep knowledge in a lot of different spaces because they're cross-functional across our entire business. There's no way I could have that depth. I would love to say I want to learn every piece of it, but I can't, and so I have to depend on them and trust them the same way I'm hoping that I can build the trust with them to be able to say and have those conversations to ensure that we all open up and be aware of the challenges that we face. So one of our mantras where we're at is open and honest and fearless communication, and I always love to add with respect, right? Because we have to respect the space that we're in too. We don't all know everything, and so I think it's all about growth too. Yeah, right.
So I think it's really easy for the differences between us, whether it be our job or our experience or things like that, to become divisive. Where I think that there's huge value though is that diversity comes different thought, different specialization, different ways to approach and solve problems. And so sometimes I think that we would do better to focus on the value of the differences rather than the negativity of the differences. But that's not always easy. We talked about kind of like strategies for how we can actually bridge that gap. And one of the things that I think is helpful is to just actually make connections with people, to learn something about them. And it doesn't, sometimes it's, your company does a beer 30 or something like that, and you meet so-and-so and you find out they have a cute cat named Spencer, or they really like to raise plants. And these little details can humanize this person, especially in a bigger company where maybe you only talk to this person through IM. Like, it's so easy with technology to have those who work in different teams or in the next room or in the next feed over only be communicated to through like instant message, and then just disembody them. They're just a typing ... So I think it's important that when we have those opportunities to celebrate with each other about that cool new acquisition or that cool new sale, or our fun love of plants or our cool cat or that fun baby picture, and just remember that people are people at the end of the day.
Oh, we have a young lady with a question over here. What's your name?
Hello, Denise. My name is Ruhoff, and I am curious how, if anybody could tell us what recommendations or what things have worked for you to organizationally bridge gaps. So, in terms of inviting outsiders to ceremonies and changing the language that you use to accommodate those people without them having to ask you to. What kinds of organization-wide things can we do to bridge that gap without having to raise awareness that there is a gap, preemptively bridging the gap?
I do want to start by saying one thing though. If you're in a place where you need somebody to honor time and quality, bringing people in and doing new activities, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be the moderator, but anyway, it's going to be really uncomfortable first when you start using these tactics. So you need to be fully locked and loaded and ready for the discomfort and uncomfortable times that even happen in those moments when you bring other people in to try to bridge the gap. So if you're not in it and ready for that, I mean, maybe just check your messages or something now.
I think this is going in the direction that you're going, but for me, I'm constantly talking and making, communication. That's very true.
That's very true.
I run the corp ops side, so everybody's laptop, desktop, any issues that they have comes up through the people who I support. And so I'm constantly trying to bridge that gap across all the groups, right? Whether it's, you know, the developers, the QA people, how can we find better tools to support you? What can I do to empower you that way? And, but in the meantime,
turning it on and off.
right, have you rebooted? That's my favorite line, right? No, but I mean, seriously, is I think just talking to people, just meeting with them and finding out what their role is, what they do. And it helps me because then I can support each one of those areas so much better just by having those small conversations and then asking them, hey, you know what, is something not working for you? And giving them the space to say, no, it's not really, and being okay with that and saying, hey, this is broken, it's been broken for weeks, I'm frustrated. Okay, first of all, number one, hey, I totally hear you, let's move forward, and what can I do to support that? And find a way, and then actually do it, and follow through. And I think that bridges gaps in communication across any spectrum, is actually support.
She's dying. Go ahead, you're next. And then Russell's next.
I believe strongly in the power of cascading goals and having really clearly articulated business goals at the top level and having everybody understand, here's what your department has to do to support that goal and to achieve that goal, and here's what this department has to do to achieve that goal, and then it goes down to the individual level, and then all of a sudden there's better visibility and there's better understanding because you have that common language then to say, oh, this revenue goal, here are the 3 things that I'm doing this quarter to help drive this revenue goal, and those are the 3 things that you're doing to help drive that revenue goal. And so now I understand how the work that you're doing connects to what we're all trying to achieve. And I think it's super underutilized because people create their own goals, which is fine, but then you have everybody working on different goals, and it's hard to stay unified when that happens.
Russell.
Hey, just come sit up here. No.
So I'm going to take this on a slightly different tack. So I just left, I promise this is a question, by the way. I just left a food fork talk on food waste and sustainability in packaging. And it's interesting to see how some of these different boards have a lot of overlap. One of the things that's being talked about on a macro level or macro level is sustainability just as a topic in general. And so I think it's important that we be talking about sustainability in the technology space as well. So to kind of play off of your topic of vocabulary, when you're looking at like the application design lifecycle and how we make software, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on like how do you view software in terms of sustainability and creating systems that are going to last for a long time, or seeing technology as something that is easily thrown away if it's not necessarily accomplishing some business objective, and how do you really value that product, that technical product that's being created?
Can I also? Oh, no, you can't.
I forgot. PSA, totally aside. If you're drinking coffee, bring a reusable plastic or tin cup tomorrow so you're not throwing away a whole bunch of these guys. Thank you.
Apparently I'm supposed to answer this. One of the things about sustainability and technology is that I think that there's an element of quality there. So building a system that can last, that can be added to, that has the ability to grow and improve and self-heal, that's also huge. On the reverse side, with technology, I think sometimes we have to also be more willing to let it fail. So this idea of iteration of, okay, we had this idea, we loved our baby idea, and we built it, and it just didn't work. It didn't meet the need of our users. It didn't meet the need of the company. And so sometimes I think it's just as hard to throw away this idea that we've invested so much time into and to have to start over. So while I think it's really cool, if you get the idea right to build something that can last, that has a quality, that can continue to grow, I think it can be just as important to be willing to throw it away, to fail fast, to iterate, to try something new.
You don't have anything on that topic?
No, she said exactly what I was thinking, and I have nothing else to add. That was perfect.
Okay, so now you have another question. I mean, not another question, but a question.
So, when we're into powerful communication, this is not a unique situation. It's something that's happening across the board. Does anybody know of any resources that are actively working at building how tech people communicate with the business side? So, like the Alden Institute works with scientists and teaches them how to communicate with lay people. Is there anybody doing that right now? I don't know. I'm curious if anybody else does.
Bridging the gap has always been a very lonely place for me, and I don't have any idea. Do you? No. Locally in the valley?
No.
I mean, I've only seen it.
Sounds like a great startup idea.
Good.
Hire me?
Hey.
What's your name?
My name is Michelle.
Michelle?
With an N.
Michelle. Michelle. The truth is no. That I know of, and I don't think I would be the one to know. Okay. But I do think that there are there are programs that can be tweaked, or you can kind of take what you learn and put it into your system, right? So I know that, for example, at Boise State University, there's a great program. I didn't mean to do a PSA on this, but the PSA's down. In conflict management and dispute resolution, that's dear to my heart. So that's a great program in terms of learning how to differentiate between positions, which is a stake in the ground, this is the only thing that works for me, versus interests, which is the huge bed of things you actually care about that underlies that position and creates more space for shared common ground between someone else's position and their actual interest. So it's a field of study that is well fleshed out, but as far as, and that's a great way to access it. But as far as specifically for this topic, not.
BSU's Center for Professional Development also has the neurology of conflict resolution, and oh man, I just got a snippet of the instructor, and what she opened you up to is how our early neurological patterns affect how we interact with each other every day, let alone under conflict. And I mean, that's pretty deep stuff though, and so I don't want to get distracted from the simpleness of some of the tactics today, which is investing in those relationships each day, every day. Bridging the gap doesn't come with some big project or some big company initiative. The man is not going to make this happen. It's you. It's each one of you, each day, every day. Being brave enough to start that conversation. Have a friend, and this is what I learned from pragmatic marketing training a couple of years back. You need to have a friend in every department. Just have that person or persons that you go to whenever you have a question or need that counsel. We can't manage ourselves and lead ourselves by ourselves. So that's another reason to have those plans, even depending on how close you guys get and compare notes. It's very, very valuable. So Janice, you touched on that, is making sure that you're investing in those relationships. We talked about, we sort of touched on your question, Luca, about some of the activities. We have cross-team demos. We've had tiger teams, special purpose teams in the past that count, that have had such a diverse group of people to the table to solve a business problem or a technology problem. That matters in order to get a quality, 5 minutes, in order to get a quality solution that is sustainable. I do want to caution everybody though, with these strategies, it is very uncomfortable to say, oh hi, I see you like the Ethiopian coffee versus, what's the other one? Backcountry blend. But it can start with something like that. That's our 2 coffees that we have. We talked about reciprocating. You just have to, if you're somebody at the end of receiving that random person who starts a conversation with you, like maybe get out of your comfort zone and actually reciprocate it back. Maybe not the same day, maybe not the same week or month, but maybe put it as a plan to do that next month. Adrian's giving you because this person was first. Your name?
Norris, and I'm sorry I forgot my count sunglasses. You touched on a really good point. I've been involved in improving initiatives in other settings, and the same patterns is not everyone's going to bridge, but you can find that it happens one at a time. They discovered in the UK that simply by arranging it so the cricket teams and the soccer teams were a mix of people, all of a sudden collaboration started happening. But it happens one at a time, and one pair of people at a time, and finding ways to do this. Like, oh my God, order Ethiopian, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. Take that stuff to Nicole in accounting, she loves it.
Yeah, anyway, well, my place prefers Ethiopian, but that's, this notion is, the other thing that I noticed is there are, in the national level, in terms of programs like this, where there's conflict management, or this bridging, there are an awful lot of people doing it and charging a lot of money, and a lot of them suck. So the other part is finding out which program, and sometimes it's just because the program, it's a good program, isn't working for you. I think this is a great opportunity. Maybe there are people working in the bushes out there. Maybe the Agile Business Review could mention something of that. People are looking for that. Is anyone here my VR chair? Is that the bridging is horrible. The people on the other side are evil and awful and all that, and it works though if you try.
I think I'd like to echo what you were just saying, and one thing that we talked about as a group that I think is important to make sure that everybody in here is thinking about, be deliberate, right? It's so hard, but just do it. I know that we keep talking about communication. It's like, what's the secret to life? Communication, right? How do you do anything? 42. Communicate, right? Yeah. But I think deliberation is really, really, really critical, and also positive intent, right? What are we, let's start this with positive intent. Let's start with being deliberate. You think it's easy for me to send an email to the AI team and say, hey, I know you don't know me, but I thought it was really cool how you jumped in and helped us. No, I was terrified. What if I said the wrong thing? Do you think it's easy for you to send?
Look who you're dealing with. Look who you're dealing with.
Send an email to the content strategist that knows much more about fantastic writing skills than I do? No, I was terrified, but try to do it anyways. I think that being deliberate about it really matters. We can all talk about communication until we're blue in the face because it's the answer to so many things in our lives. But be deliberate, keep continuing to do it, and also just try to focus on that positive intent.
Last question.
It's not a question, but I just wanted to add to what you were saying about how, like, I don't know, working in tech, there's a lot of introverts, and maybe the hardest thing for them to do is meet new people in different departments, people that they don't know. So I think maybe like the extroverts of the company have to kind of, sounds dumb, but champion the, like, oh, hey, you should meet this person. I think you two would really like each other, and kind of like spark relationships with people.
Thank you for the shout out.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that because I believe that's really important. I think being self-aware also is important. If you are a total extrovert, like I'm a complete introvert, and I'm sure you all see that.
She's very
I do focus on toning myself down or being self-aware in situations so that I'm not overbearing or trying to impose my space on someone else. It's a lot about awareness too, and being able to communicate that way, because if you're just running like a bull through the china shop, and it doesn't help anybody. So communication that way.
The other thing I want to add about assuming positive intent, and something that came up earlier, Tricia, with you, is you probably should, it's really good to assume capacity of the other person that you're trying to talk to. So you're not talking down to, assume positive intent on their part, and when you're the person doing the communicating, assume they can take it. They have the capacity to understand what you're trying to convey. And if they ask for a picture, and you're truly wanting to bridge the gap, get on that whiteboard and draw the picture, okay? be very aware of the person you're dealing with. Never assume they do not have the capacity to understand your financial jargon, your sales jargon, your technical concepts. Just, that's a big roadblock, I think, when we're communicating. I will say this as far as bridging the gaps. You mentioned extroverts, and we got pointed, several of us got pointed to, you know, extroverts and introverts still might have common place, or something in common, and that is, I'm the type of extrovert that refuels through being alone. And so I can truly appreciate your preference of being left alone and not communicating. And back to the self-awareness, we can flex our style. Sky's the limit.
Yep. Awesome. Yep.
We're done.
Thank you. Yeah.
Start getting into your question about entering computer science, but I know what an API is, so just come talk to me. I'd love to teach you.
Actually, I got something for you.
And have we scared you?
Every year you sponsor Hackfort, which is, for those of you who are not aware, Hackfort is a tech festival that brings the community together to share knowledge and skills with one another. Hackfort.